Thanks for joining us today at BIB Today, the daily podcast from the newsroom of business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Starting May 1st, one of the most significant transformations of our vehicle insurance commences in British Columbia. The Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, ICBC, as we know it, introduces what it terms an enhanced care program, which almost sounds too good to be true. Lower premiums and improved care and recovery benefits if you're injured in a crash. If you're as curious as I am, the person with the answers is with me today. Nicolas Jimenez is the CEO of ICBC. Good to see you.
Hi, Kirk. How are you?
Good. You know this better than anyone, that the two principal criticisms of our insurance system are always costs too much, provides too little. So we're going to look at how this new program attacks these two areas. First of all, let's go to the benefits side. Why are these new benefits better? What are the main ones?
Well, I'm going to even step back before we start enumerating what are the benefits. The design of an enhanced care model inherently works better because everybody gets treated the same. In the tort model, you can have two people in the same vehicle, one driver, one passenger, same injuries if there's a crash, and there are vastly different experiences and outcomes associated with how they get treated, what benefits they have access to, et cetera. An enhanced care model says, look, it doesn't matter who caused that crash. The most important thing is that we put everybody on a path to recovery and that everybody gets the same. Now, what's especially true in our new model is that the benefits that are going to be on the table, available to you, are vastly superior to what exists today. So today, your entitlement for accident benefits runs at about $300,000. In the future, it's essentially unlimited. So whatever you need, depending on your circumstance, you will have available to you. And we've introduced, in a very kind of detailed way, a number of benefits and the amounts and how they can be accessed. But it's incredible. Like the support that you're going to get is just going to be vastly different, from income replacement to the care that you need if you're incapacitated and you can't take care of yourself, cook meals, someone looking after you in your home, whether you need counseling, it goes on and on. But the array is just so much better than it is in current state.
I mean, it raises so many questions. I don't know where to start. But I mean, one of the first things that trips across my mind is, why didn't we do this before?
Well, that's an easy and a complicated question. But what I know is that other provinces have done this before. So thankfully, the model that we're developing is one that's based on what already exists in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Manitoba is probably the closest model that is the one that we've largely built our system from. Quebec has an enhanced care model as well. So, and those provinces went, Quebec in the 70s, Manitoba and Saskatchewan in the 90s. I can't speak for what happened between 1973 when we started with the model we have today, but what I can say is, we're moving in the right direction. Essentially, I think you get to a point where these tort systems become unaffordable. And that's where we were at, clearly. And you're seeing that in other provinces where, tort jurisdictions, they're just at the mercy of tort, which is an inherently expensive model. And it doesn't do a very good job, I think, of really focusing on the person.
Again, it will beg some questions here. What are the trade-offs? It does sound ideal. What are the trade-offs for consumers? Do you see any?
I really don't. I mean, you will hear people on the other side of this debate, and there's not many, but there are some, obviously, those in the legal community, who will say, well, you're not giving people their right to sue, and they're not having access to the courts to settle this. And I say, well, to what end? If we can provide, the same benefits and more that you would otherwise be getting through the courts, and we can do it, with more certainty, we can do it with more care involved in the system, and we can do it more quickly. then I don't actually think you're giving up anything. And I think, in fact, you said it at the beginning, you're getting kind of more for less. And it sounds too good to be true, but the reality is the system is in every single respect better for customers when it comes, and particularly injured. I mean, really, we're talking about injured customers because the vehicle damage parts of our businesses are going to be largely the same. So for the 50,000 or so people who get injured in a crash every year, this system is going to be so much better. And I don't think they're giving up anything. I really don't.
So I mean, circumstances change. Do you have mechanisms to revisit the benefits, to appeal the benefits? What is it? Is it this is the last word on the situation kind of thing?
No, well, I think there's a couple of things in your question. I mean, so there's let me start with the design of the system and how the system is going to kind of self-monitor and self-regulate. So there's legislative built into the legislation. The regulations are reviews, around the benefits. We've got escalators in the regulations that say, look, costs are going to go up in life generally for all of us. So the amounts attached to these benefits should follow the cost of living. So that's a really important change. That wasn't true in the old world.
Right.
And that was a problem, clearly. And that's why we had to make the change back in 2019 from 150,000 to 300,000 in terms of the access benefit limits. But the kind of the more fundamental question, I think, is, where do I go if I don't feel like I'm being given a fair shake? And I think that's a fair question. And we're expanding the channels, if you will, and improving on the channels that exist today. So you've always had internal channels. You obviously deal with an adjuster. They're going to be claims recovery specialists in the future. And if that's not working the way you want it to work, then you've got internal escalation opportunities through their manager and then into customer relations. And once you kind of get into the customer relations side of things, it triggers a whole bunch of internal reviews that we kick in, from technical reviews to business reviews, outside experts, et cetera. And then through all of that, if there's still a feeling that something's not quite right, you've got external bodies that you can seek help from. You've got a new fairness officer. So legislation was passed. This is in a position established in legislation and regulation that we're actually going through the process of hiring right now. The government and our board will hire a fairness officer, and they will be able to, consider your particular issue. And if that's not working for you, you've got an ombudsman, an officer of the provincial legislature. And if you still find that that's not working for you, you've got access to the Civil Resolution Tribunal. So there's lots of steps in the system where I think people will have opportunity to say, hey, I don't like the way this is going. Now, even before it gets to any of those points, if we look at just an individual and their particular care journey, the key thing here is ICBC is we're not doctors, we're not staff with medical experts. So we're leaning on the healthcare system, and that includes doctors, but also the array of treatment providers to say, look, we're going to put together a care plan. That care plan is going to be based on your particular injury. And ICBC is going to kind of case manage that, but not in the way that they're getting involved in deciding how many treatments you get. It's really up to the individual and their treatment provider to say, here's the path ahead. And if that's not working because of whatever reason, there's new opportunities to get medical professionals into the system to say, look, I'm going to take a look at this to see where recovery is getting stalled and how we can accelerate it or amplify it. So, these are all new features that will be built into a recovery model that I think should give people confidence they're going to get to where they need to be.
So you will have choices of the medical practitioners that you have. There's no question there. Is there any place left now in the system for personal injuries lawyers?
Well, outside of the auto space, they'll continue to to work in, slip and falls and in store retail environments and anywhere that's
Yeah.
not at work or not in a vehicle. But as it relates to the vehicle part of it, no. Now, if you're driving your vehicle in a jurisdiction where there's a tort scheme, so most places in the state and obviously a number of provinces, Canada, you're still going to have you're still going to be subject to tort if you are involved in a crash and you've caused that. In BC, no. Now,
Yeah.
I should say, actually, let me qualify that. There are certain instances in the legislation that provides for people to seek other damages beyond those that are defined in sort of the care model. So if there's a criminal conviction involved in the person who hit you, or if there's some kind of liability, someone designed a bridge and that bridge collapsed, and you feel like there's some punitive damages attached to that. But it's really limited in the scenarios where that.
Yeah. Now, obviously, yeah. Okay. You've still got countless numbers of these cases. Well, you probably know how many there are that are still left in the system come May 1st. Presumably, they run their course. How long do you think that takes before the system truly transforms into this new one?
That's a good question. And you're right, there's a lot. There's probably about 80 or 90,000 left to settle. And
wow.
That may not sound like a lot, but the value of those claims is around $10 billion. And so, we see that happening over really a 5 to 7 year time frame. Now, some will obviously go beyond that, but the vast majority should be settled within a 5 to 7 year time frame. But it's a big part of our business. And quite frankly, it's a business that we can't just sort of, turn our attention away from, because, every dollar that, a claim settles for more than what we think it's worth, has to get paid for in the current system. So we've estimated those claims at 10 billion. And if through some circumstance of, people trying to accelerate the value of those claims in ways that, are more than what we've estimated, well, that's a real risk for us. We have to manage that really carefully.
Yeah. Was there any consideration given to, frankly, suffocating that entire system and just saying, here we are, we have a new one, and everybody now falls into line with that, and all these other cases are essentially irrelevant now?
Yeah, I'm not sure that would be legal or constitutional.
Okay.
So no, I think there was never an idea that would be
a
realistic option to consider.
Good to know. So when a system confers more benefits, usually it comes with more costs. So how did you get at the cost side?
Well, there's going to be different kinds of costs. So we are going to see, the way we categorize costs today is, costs against what we say accident benefits, and then costs that are derived in tort, like the actual litigation amount. So, we're going to see more costs in those accident benefits, because those are the things that you're paying for. We call them first party benefits. And there's going to be new costs that were previously covered for by people who were at fault. So you're going to have access to a whole range of benefits, and at higher levels than you did to income replacement's a great example. So in the current state, if you were at fault, you didn't, the income replacement amounts were, say, the mid 50,000. The income replacement amounts available to you today is closer to 100,000. So those costs are going to go up. But those are appropriate costs. What's going to go down substantially is the litigation costs associated with hiring lawyers. We spend about $170 million a year on defense counsel. There's a huge cost to that. We've got an in-house, team of lawyers as well. And then there's all the costs just involved in the legal process and payments, the contingency fees that go not to customers, but to their plaintiff counsel. So those costs are being pulled out of the system, and that's where largely the savings are being derived from.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated with process when you see this kind of transformation, because at times the transparency of the process can help convince people of its legitimacy. So did you start out with any ideas, any beliefs, even a target, a percentage of what ICBC could yield in the way of savings for consumers and in the way of benefits for them when this?
Well, I'd say yes with a little bit of a but. So, the idea of an enhanced care model is one that I think has a lot of merits on its own as a concept. But then you need to test it. You actually need to sort of design the model in order to prove out the fact that it's going to be a better model than the one that you're currently in. And so it wasn't until we began to design the model and use actuarial methods to kind of build out, not just what would the product look like and what would our claims experience be, that would then tell us, okay, we think that the model is going to cost this much. And that is significantly less than the current model we've got. So that's when we got to the point where we can save, probably about $1.5 billion in this new world. So you don't start out with $1.5 billion and then design a model around that. You start out with the idea that there's a better way to do auto insurance in BC. And then you build it, and then you arrive at where you think you're going to save.
Were you surprised at how much was available?
No, I'm not, because you just have to look at the litigation costs that I was describing earlier. The average settlement period for a tort claim today is somewhere in the 3 to 4 year range. There's huge costs attached to that just to have, legal counsel mine those files, and those aren't funds that are going into somebody's, care recovery. Those are costs, attached to medical experts and paralegal and legal assistants and lawyers and court fees, and just goes on and on and on. And those are costs that are just being churned. That we just feel that is not a good use of premium dollars.
I'm also interested in the culture that likely had to change a bit. In this, people I think have a perception that ICBC can be a little bit adversarial when you start making a claim, when you begin to talk about these things. You're going into a system that has more of a clarity about outcomes now. So what does that do in terms of the culture that you as a CEO have to then work with internally in order to change the channel a little bit?
I think it's a fair question. The tort system drives a certain behavior, right? You have to play by a set of rules that are designed, by a system that you didn't get to design. I'll tell you, most of our people breathe a sigh of relief. Tort's very stressful, and for a large percentage of customers, our staff were never able to interact with them because there was always an intermediary. So you never got a chance to kind of begin a relationship around a care journey. It was really beginning a relationship around a lawsuit. So there's a big sigh of relief, I think, from our folks that, this model is not going to be focused on conflict, but one focused on recovery and care. So now that's not a change you can make overnight. And this is your point around culture. So I think, we've, since 2019, we've begun to build a new kind of recovery function that's specifically designed to, do this kind of work. Now, over time, if you imagine, you said, we've got 5 to 7 years to sort of run off that old book. And then, over time, we're going to build up the new book. So we're growing a team and capabilities and new processes and new relationships. And that's been a huge change for us and a positive change. So we've hired about 200 people since 2019 in this recovery space. And a lot of those people have backgrounds from, the allied treatment professional community. So chiros, physios, OTs, kinesiologists. And this is a new muscle coming into the company with a new mindset around, hey, I know how to work with people to help them on a care journey. That's what I do, what I was trained to do. And those folks are going to help lead us and others in this new world. The second part of it is not just the culture internally around how we look at solving a claim. It's how we work with the community. So I think it's fair to say prior to 2018, we had a fairly tense relationship with the medical community and the treatment provider. We didn't get along that well because I don't think we worked at those relationships. But we started in the first set of reforms, and then now with enhanced care, to really build relationships where relationships previously had been left, unbuilt, unmanaged, and that was a huge thing for us. I can't say enough about how much work it was to kind of begin talking, not just to, associations representing, chiropractors and kinesiologists and physiotherapists and others, but with the disability community. So, one example is we actually brought in, people from Pain BC, Fraser Valley Brain Injury Association, the Spinal Cord Injury Association of BC. We said, look, help us design this system. Help us figure out where the system doesn't work today for people who are seriously or catastrophically injured. They got right down to what should we call our people? Like what title should we give our staff? And they said, no, don't call them this, call them that, because this has a negative connotation. This scares off, our community. And it was hugely valued. We've had probably somewhere between 70 and 100 meetings in the last 2 years to help think through, design, and ultimately build this new world. That's a culture change that is going to last, forever.
Well, it also begs one other question, which is, a lot of places put off some of their own reforms, some of their own big issues because of the pandemic, right? The pandemic disrupted everything. What gave you the confidence that you could still meet, say, a May 1st timeline here, given that a lot of this work probably had to take place when you didn't have the capacity to have in-person meetings?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. I'm reflecting. This change was announced in February of 2020. A month later, we were in a pandemic. And so, we had no option to stop the project or to delay the project. And so we went virtual almost from the get-go. And we've got about 400 people working on this internally, thousands of whom will ultimately be impacted internally, and then tens of thousands externally, from our brokers to the treatment professionals, to doctors, to the stakeholders. And so it was amazing to be, and I can take no credit because, they're doing the detailed work, but people responded because I think they had a real clarity of purpose, and a really galvanizing date in front of them that was going to be set in legislation that really had no ability to change.
You had no ability at all. You couldn't have.
Never entered the conversation. We never contemplated not delivering May 1st. And so the entire system moved, and I give credit, like I said, to the stakeholders, who all those meetings I described, all virtual. To the consultants who are helping us, some of whom are, not in this time zone, some of whom are not even in this continent, who are just adapting and adjusting their lives, to meet a Pacific Standard Time working schedule, to our brokers who've had to handle all the training and all this work in those circumstances. Anyway, it's fair to say people just dug deep and got it done. It's an amazing accomplishment. I hope someone writes about this in a business case, because I think it's a really remarkable.
Yeah. A couple of things left in our conversation I want to pursue. One is I think people might wonder, given that we're doing so many things online now, we've moved so quickly in digitizing a lot of our transactions, a lot of our daily lives. Period. Why there isn't really any kind of signal that the bricks and mortar of the auto plan, of the buildings where you walk in and sit down and fill out your form, are disappearing. Are they just there on a bit of borrowed time now?
I don't think so. Well, let me answer it in two ways. One, and you may be aware of this, but we're actually in the middle of developing an online insurance model that would be implemented in May of next year. We wanted to go through one full policy year in this new world before we delivered an online option for people who want to renew on, online. So that's happening, and that's a great thing. Would I like this to happen 5 years ago? Absolutely. Is it happening now, and is it the right time? Yeah. So people who want to renew their insurance online next year, they can do so. That's a great thing. But what I will say is there remains an important role for brokers. I think a lot of people want to dismiss or diminish the complexity of insurance. It's auto insurance, it's the same as last year, or whatever. I've been buying this for 20, 30 years. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think it understates the complexity of the insurance contract. And I think this is where customers often get frustrated in the claims journey, where they don't understand what they bought, and they don't understand what they're entitled to or not entitled to. And I think that's where a broker really, provides a lot of value. And so even in this online model that we're developing, they're still going to be involved in a way that brings the benefit of all their, training, et cetera. If we look back to the pandemic and we saw what happened, last spring when basically the bottom fell out, many brokers had to close their offices. We switched and introduced literally almost overnight. It was actually over 2 nights, over a weekend, an option for people to renew over the phone and through email. At one point in April and May, 80% of customers were doing that. Now we kept that option, so people could continue to do that. But as things started to open up again in June, when the provincial health officer kind of eased back on those restrictions, that 80%, well, that started to fall really quickly, and people went back to seeing their broker. So right now, I think it's probably about 20%. The last time I checked that number. So is that a pattern of convenience? Is that just falling into repetition? I don't know, but it tells me a little bit that people aren't ready to say goodbye to the broker, and neither are we. We're invested in the channel, even if we can provide an online option.
Yeah, and certainly as you make this transformation, people will have questions, and nobody likes dealing with a bot. Now, tell me a bit. We alluded to earlier on where this leaves ICBC in terms of the context of other jurisdictions with insurance. Where do you think it places British Columbia now in terms of how it shapes up against other provinces, for instance?
Well, I think our product is among the best, if not the best, in the country. So I said we built it off of Manitoba, but I think we introduced things that even Manitoba doesn't have. So and we've got features of our model. Again, it's the last mover advantage. I mean, it's sort of a sad thing to say, but it provides you with the benefit to learn where others have tried and failed, or tried and been successful. So I think we've been able to build that into this model. So in Canada, our model stands up against any in the country, if not, top. Now we have to prove that out, but certainly on paper, it's designed to be one of the best.
And so when you finally catch your breath on the morning of May 1st and introduce this, what's the next wave of work?
Well, I mean, May 2nd is not, we'll walk away from this project and, kind of wrap our hands and say, thank goodness that year's over. I think the journey's just beginning. So it's going to take a while for us to mature the model. We built it on a bunch of assumptions about what we think would happen. We have to make sure that those assumptions hold true. And if not, we sort of calibrate and adjust. We've got to continue to work with stakeholders to make sure that there are no pain points that emerge where, things we missed, blind spots, et cetera. So we're going to continue that work, and that's at least 1 to 2 years to really get the system fully formed. I think we're going to turn our attention to the digital platforms that we have for services. So I mentioned insurance is one. We have online claims options today. So you can put in your first notice of loss and check the claim status. They can be doing a lot more for customers. So I think we're going to be investing more heavily in those digital solutions for customers. And I think we're going to be looking more generally at the vehicle products, because there's a lot of cost pressure. Vehicle costs and repairs, they're going up in every jurisdiction, not just BC, 4 to 5% per year. And that's a challenge that every insurer has got to face. Vehicle replacing a bump a bumper, replacing, a side view mirror, replacing, quarter panels. Those things are loaded with technology and they're really expensive to repair. So we've got
Yeah,
to
I
dig
just
in.
had a car door replaced this year, and I my car must be worth $700,000 or something. I mean, every component has that kind of thing proportionally. So
You
that
must be driving a carbon McLaren.
well, no, electric vehicle.
No, it's true.
But I am interested. So that's interesting. So you think that's probably the next frontier here is to deal with that side of the business.
It is. And if you spend any time talking to the collision repair industry, they would say the same. They've got a bunch of challenges. The one is obviously the complexity of vehicle design and repair. The other is, the manufacturers are increasingly looking to get into this space and own this space, and that whole sort of end to end. I want to sell you the car. I want to sell you the insurance. I want to, control the data that's in the car. And then I want to control the repair experience and all the parts that go into that thing. Well, when you have that closed ecosystem, they get to manage the cost structure attached to that. So we have to work with our partners to figure out how to keep that part of the business, which is worth about $1.5 billion, in check, because we don't want that to be the next transformational journey that we've got to go through, because costs are going up higher than we think is reasonable.
Yeah, you don't want the 21st century tort equivalent emerging on you.
No, we don't. We really don't. The goal is to keep this product affordable and to keep this product one that works for customers, and to give people options so that the product they buy give them the chance to be affordable, distance-based driving. Right? You've seen that as a fairly standard offering in other markets as a way for people to control their insurance bill. These are things that we need to kind of begin putting on the table, thinking more about. It's just part of being a modern insurer, and that's clearly where we're going.
Yeah. Last question. I mean, not everybody's using an automobile or a truck as their vehicle of choice now. We have a lot of new forms of personal transportation that are whipping around our streets. Again, what's the guidance that we get from ICBC about where it's going to be involved in things like electric bikes, scooters, those kinds of things that people are using for good economic purposes in order to get from here to there?
Yeah, I mean, mobility and micromobility, I think it's absolutely the shift that's happening in transportation. I mean, COVID sort of created some disturbances in the way people use things like rideshare and ride hail and transit, but outside of those mobility options, the ones you've just described are absolutely, a place where we need to get our heads around in terms of, product options, potential gaps, licensing and registration issues. Some of those involve the province, obviously, because they're parts of the Motor Vehicle Act that belong to us, don't belong to us. So that is an interesting and urgent policy conversation that I think needs to be had for sure.
Yeah.
Expect to see and hear more.
Well, we could spend all day, but I want to thank you for your time today, Nicolas. It's been great talking to you again.
Yeah, thanks. I've enjoyed this.
Nicolas Jimenez is the CEO of ICBC. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of BIV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again.